So without further ado, let me introduce Ali Nawab. He is the CEO and founder of Agent Noon. And he's going to come talk to us about kind of this transition and where he's seeing things moving away from like static metrics and dashboards to something that's more agile and dynamic. So please welcome Ali.
Hi everyone, I'm Ali. This is actually way more people than I thought would show up, because typically they put vendor presentations after lunch so people can come in, see a few good pictures, and kind of be on their merry way. So I'm going to try to keep it quick. I'll try to leave some time for questions. I wanted to quickly introduce myself. Software engineer. I built software enterprise integrations into Oracle Fusion and BEA across HR, finance, payroll very early in my career. Went to business school, became a management consultant, did a lot of org, M&A, transformation type work, all in PowerPoint, Excel. Thought it really sucked. But then I became a startup founder. About 10 years ago, I started an on-device machine learning company that got acquired by a larger company, and they had no idea what to do with us, right? They knew what to do with our technology, but they had no idea what to do with the rest of the people. And they had made like 4 such acquisitions in the last year. So I took it upon myself to build this model to help them and us figure out where we were going to go, what was going to happen to my team, et cetera, et cetera. But I never still thought about it as being a product. I always thought about it as maybe a consulting firm or something that I can do to help companies figure out what post-M&A or M&A scenarios look like. That was 4 years ago. About 3 years ago, I realized that actually nobody was good at this. And the software to do strategic decision-making was actually fragmented into a whole bunch of areas like analytics, performance. Depending on which stakeholder you talk to, you got a completely different picture of what things look like. So we built this product. The company is called Agent Noon. As you know, in the future, there's going to be a lot of agents. Noon is when it's brightest. So Agent Noon helps you figure out from that fog on what clarity looks like. This is a People Analytics conference, so I'm talking about analytics, and I want to talk to you about how it's moving very quickly. I think parts of it are already here. Other parts are still on their way. This is a quote that has like conflicting attribution, but if you've read Neuromancer, anyone? A science fiction book? Not the right, oh, great. Mostly attributed to the author of that book. But like, I think it really appeals to me because I feel like we see these technological waves happen, but they happen very quickly in certain areas and very slowly in others. And people can be either way ahead of the curve or way behind. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of what the future looks like. You know, you all know People Analytics way better than I do, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. But like, really where we are is moving from really basic reporting and dashboards to having systems that are integrated, to more advanced analytics and predictive modeling, to starting to get to a bit more prescriptive analytics. And finally, to what I'm starting to call dynamic people analytics, is where the world is changing very, very quickly. How do you adapt your analytics to do all of what is in that ladder and be able to say, in this situation, here are 4 different ways we can react to this situation. For each of them, what is our analytics stack saying we should do, right? Very great to say in theory, very hard to do in practice, because analytics is painful. It's hard to do. There is a lot of data. There's a lot of silos in the organization. Just having data that updates every day is seems like things from the future, because it takes a lot of time to build. It takes a lot of time to update. A lot of analytics today is like a Power BI wrapper, which is great if you want to run dashboards. But if you want to do any kind of scenario modeling on it, well, guess what? Power BI doesn't do that yet, so you're kind of stuck, right? The other problem is I've never met a company. So I'll tell you one thing I got majorly wrong when I started this business is that I was going to build an AI company to do a lot of scenario modeling and simulation. And I figured, you know, I used to work in this area 15, 20 years ago. The data was a complete disaster at that time. In 15 years, we must have evolved to have really advanced data cleansing, debugging capabilities and pipelines, and they would kind of figure out what a rate card versus a salary versus a fringe benefit was. Completely wrong about that. Data is still extremely fragmented. It's still a huge mess. It takes a lot of time to get to truth. And when you get to truth and when you start to present to a business leader and they're like, hold on a second, where's Bob's team? Oh, you've suddenly lost all credibility with them. So garbage in, garbage out is still a problem. I feel like it's going to be a problem forever. And then finally, this is kind of my big pet peeve, is like any little minor tailoring, you have to go to IT. In most large enterprise, IT is very busy. They have a lot of stuff to do. They're also very expensive. So unless you have like a 200-hour work order, they don't have time for you, right? $200 at a couple $100 an hour. Suddenly the hurdle rate for making that little tweak happen went through the roof, and you're kind of like, maybe we'll just do it in Excel, right? So that happens very, very rare, very, very commonly. And I think the other thing that it needs to start to do is, and I've heard this from so many people on the panels already, analytics, data analysis needs to help a business leader solve a burning hair on fire problem for them. If it's basically like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff, but it's mostly like a lagging indicator, it might be useful. It might be a report that people send out once a month and, whatever. But really what you want to be able to do is to say, as a leader, as my leadership team is looking at this, what are the use cases that they're looking at? What are they looking to do? Are they looking to strengthen leadership and talent? Are they looking to improve M&A, which is kind of my inception use case for this product? Are they looking to enable some sort of business strategy and they want to flexibly transform their organization? They want to be able to fine-tune their operating model. Do they want to drive agility, transformation? That's a big new and emerging trend. And really what they want to do is they want to be able to either save time or money, and they want to be able to do it in a really quantifiable way. I think it was the person, Imran, who was speaking about it yesterday for people who attended this talk, where he was like, if you get the business leader buy-in, you can fly through things very, very quickly. And if you're kind of doing business as usual, like here's a bunch of charts that show that our attrition is, going down. And the business leader's like, well, I actually want our attrition to go up a little bit given the pressures that I have. So they are fairly lagging indicators. And I think the job of a great analytics function is to be able to really meet the needs of the business so that you can really drive outcomes. By the way, I'm saying a lot of crazy things here, I imagine. So I will leave some time at the end for questions. You can grill me as much as you want. I would really like that. Specifically, we talk about org transformation. The world is changing very quickly for a variety of reasons, and organizations need to be kind of accepting the idea that change is the only constant. And in response to that change, you have to be able to, respond very quickly, hence terms like organizational agility, effectiveness, et cetera, are coming up. And I think, again, like I've said this before, the Power BI wrapper doesn't really work in a fast-changing environment. It works when you're business as usual, you have a nice monopoly, every year, the market grows 2% and you grow accordingly. But like if in a market where you're in real competition, you're really being challenged by incumbents, by technology, by global macro trends, you have to be able to advance very quickly. And I think in the org transformation context, being in a silo just doesn't work anymore. Because if you put yourself in the leader's shoes, they are looking at every decision from three different, completely unique perspectives. The first one is the structure of my organization. The second one is the cost. And the third one is my productivity and what is that going to do for us from our business perspective. Now, typically, I like to say this, that I've learned over 20 years that HR speaks French and finance speaks German. So what you need really is a little instant translation tool in between them. Yeah. So I guess, and then, you have all these language challenges and translation challenges. And I'm sure if I started to kind of get a bunch of finance people in this room and a bunch of business people in the room, and we started to have a conversation about what does analytics mean, people would come up with fairly divergent definitions of what it means for them. When you layer on all the functional stuff, right, which is typically supposed to be an intervention towards a business strategy enablement, like org design, operating model work, org effectiveness, strategic workforce planning, people analytics. Again, you're looking at so many different choices. The funny part is, like, we talk to tons of customers and prospects on a weekly basis, right? And when they say, we want to do workforce planning, half the time we have no idea what that's going to end up being. We have to keep listening, keep doing discovery, like, oh, so this is what you mean when you say workforce planning, because the definitions are also very different. But if you look at a transformation, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to figure out where you are, develop a baseline, right? Then you want to be able to model a bunch of scenarios over different time horizons. In the immediate, we need to do this. In 6 months, we need to do this. In 12 months, we need to do this. Over 5 years, this is what it looks like. And then you have to be able to say, for all of these scenarios, you have to say, what are the human capital impacts of this? What are the financial impacts of this? Oftentimes, a lot of the leaders have already done a mental model in their head. So you're actually trying to reverse into whatever they're already thinking. And how many management consultants are in the room? Hopefully none. Okay, one. Okay, sorry. The thing that makes the McKinseys of the world really good, I know from experience, is that they are really good at anticipating what the leader is trying to do and build a structural framework to get to that conclusion. I'm not saying there's any intellectual dishonesty. They're just very well attuned to figuring out, okay, this leader wants to shave off 20% of his workforce cost, and now I'm going to reverse into it. While the poor in-house team that does all the work, does slave away, it's like, we've been saying the same thing, just in less prettier slides and maybe, a little bit less structure. So, I mean, from our perspective, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to democratize somebody else is speaking here, I guess. Is there some feedback, right? Okay, thank you. We want to be able to have the same capabilities as a McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Deloitte would have within an in-house capability. I firmly believe that org design, analytics, all of these things go together, number one. And two, they're going to be a differentiated capability between companies that win and companies that don't. How do you do that? You build tools, and we have obviously our approach where you can bring your people cost, your financials, like what I mean by people's like your org chart, your hierarchies, your agile structures. How do you actually do the work? Where are there exceptions to your spans and layers? What are the principles for your org? Like, how many people is too many in terms of a span function, right? Similarly, budgets. What do you think about when it comes to relocating people? Are you flexible in certain areas? What are your principles there? And then finally, what are the work that they're going to do? These are all three very different systems, very different languages, going from positions, roles, cost centers. Projects are a completely different battle on their own. What if there was a way to build an ontology to bring all of these things together? I know it sounds a little insane, but let's say you started off piecemeal and you were able to map it so that when you could say, if we do this, this is what's going to happen to a core metric that the business leader really cares about. For example, if you take the aviation industry, the business leader really wants to improve the airline seat kilometers or airline seat miles and lift them by 20% year over year. How do we structure our operating model? How do we structure our organization? What are the skills that we need to invest in? What are the interventions? I feel like a lot of these things are intervention first, and let's figure out kind of where this fits into the broader strategy. And then you should be able to do tons of scenarios of what this looks like. And because you can do it yourself, and in many cases with our product, what we've seen is the leader can actually go in and say, oh, I really wanted to move all these people to a low-cost location because then I can really get the cost benefit. Once you do it, you also start to see the second-order effects of what that actually means. And you can be like, oh, actually, now that I see it, I see what are all the flaws with it, right? Until then, they're like aggravated that I keep saying we could move all these people to wherever, and nobody's doing the work on it, so I'm going to go hire whoever, my favorite consulting firm, and they're going to tell me why this is a good idea. How many people saw the thing about McKinsey that said that trash cans should have lids? Nobody? There was news. Look it up, trash cans and lids. That was a whole study that concluded that trash cans should have lids in New York.
McKinsey's been controversial recently.
I mean, I'm not picking on McKinsey in particular, but ultimately, I think there's a need why leaders buy those services is because they're not getting what they want in terms of fidelity and structure. And I think there's technologies evolving fast enough now where if you democratize a lot of this stuff, you may need them for other maybe more strategic, higher order things, but you definitely don't need them to figure out how you should work, right? Ultimately what we do, as I mentioned, is we help model human capital and financial impacts of all the things that you're saying. So if you're like, we want to do this, we want to acquire this company, what does it look like after? What does it look like before? All of this thing happens instantly. It's very easy. We get a lot of people using our product. And I think that's where the future is going. I would love to get some challenges, some questions in while we have a couple of minutes remaining. You, sir, please go ahead.
Wow, why are you being called sir?
I can call
Getting
you Michael.
old, people are calling me sir. Anyway, that's nice. But as a statistician who's done a ton of predictive analytics and data cleaning, I'm not sure it's push button. So can you just comment on that?
It's not push button at all, right? Let's be real about this. I think there is a way to do things once and let them compound. So I'll give you a very specific example. When you do a span in an organization, you may want to exclude certain people because it just doesn't make sense to include. It doesn't make sense to have one person have 1,000 people reporting to them just because they manage a part of the organization or whatnot. You don't need to ask that every single time. Once you remember it and it's a rule, it should just work, right? So I think that what we can do is we have a data foundry in our product where we have this ontology where we map all your data so that once you say, like for example, cabin crew is all reporting to this one person, but the span of control is not 5,000 because we just didn't know who these people should report to and we put them there. We can remember that. And I think that's where, if you see where the machine learning arc is going, the tools will remember, so you don't have to do the same thing over and over again. Anything else? Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
What about the companies that can't afford to work with the McKinseys or the bigger folks of the world? Like, how could you weave yourself into that, and what would you advise them on?
So I think that we do work with a lot of sort of mid-sized companies, call them like, let's say, 5,000-ish people. Because the product is easy to use, we can onboard them very quickly. We can also offer it to them on a price point where they can start with, let's say, 5 users or maybe something like that. And as they build the capability in-house, they can expand it. Our product has seen viral growth inside companies, and it's always like a land and expand strategy. Typically, enterprise software is sold in bulk, like you buy it for everyone in your company.
Right.
2 people use it, so your per seat cost is actually humongous. And we just have some innovation around pricing model to let smaller businesses get going.
Excellent, thank you.
Welcome.
So I assume it's a software as a service model probably, right?
Yeah.
And is it customizable? Can we customize our inputs? Not just those 3 that you mentioned, but if you want to add additional, our own, obviously, can we do that?
Yes. So it is enterprise software as a service, which means we do all the enterprise SLAs, single sign-on, SOC 2 Type 2, everything that your IT would need before they even let you get close to it. Plus, we let you bring in any kind of data. We don't actually have any limits on what data you would bring in. So people are bringing in like sales quotas. They're bringing in tons of CPG sold. We have a clean energy company that's our customer where they basically pivot everything into like gigawatt hours. And like it has really interesting insights where like I have 3 times the number of finance people per gigawatt hour in 2 markets that are right next to each other. What's happening here that is very different from the other one? So a lot of exploratory work also happens that way. A typical customer, just to give you the last thing here, a typical customer will have about 100 custom data points on top of the usual stuff that you get out of a workday or something like that.
And so I assume it's a high-touch model probably for initial phase,
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Sorry.
Ali. Thanks, everyone.